I grew up in boardrooms, not playgrounds. My childhood was made of polished floors, shiny glass walls, and the endless echo of phones ringing inside my father's company. To the world, we were the picture of success. My father was a respected businessman. My family was admired everywhere we went, and people would whisper that I was the daughter who would one day inherit it all. I believed them. I believed my father most of all. He told me again and again, "Stay close, learn from me, and one day this company will be yours." And so, while my friends went to parties and enjoyed their weekends, I was attending business dinners, reviewing reports, and following him into meeting after meeting. I wasn't just a daughter. I was a shadow, always by his side, carrying his files, taking his notes, remembering every detail. I thought my hard work would pay off. I thought it would mean something, but the truth is it meant nothing. Because the future I was building was never mine. The years of sacrifice, the endless hours, the dreams I placed into his hands, they were all stolen. My father had already made his choice, and his choice was not me. It was my brother, the one who never cared, who never showed up, who spent his nights drowning in luxury while I lived every moment of my life inside those walls. I only learned the truth when it was too late, when the papers were already signed and the empire I helped build was handed over to someone who had never earned it. This is the story of how my own father betrayed me, how he erased my place in the company I helped him grow, and how I turned that betrayal into a revenge my family never saw coming. Before I continue, if you enjoy shocking stories of family betrayal, revenge, and hidden drama, make sure you subscribe right now. That way, you won't miss the next story that will leave you speechless. I still remember the first time my father called me into his office. I was only 16. He placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "You are my right hand. This company will be yours." Those words lit a fire in me. I believed they were a promise that every sacrifice I made would one day be rewarded. But promises can be broken, especially when they come from the people you trust most. From the moment I turned 16, my life stopped belonging to me. While other girls my age were dreaming about their first cars or their first dances, I was buried in spreadsheets and strategy meetings. My father treated me like his personal apprentice. At first, I felt proud. I thought I was being shaped into something greater. He would take me to conferences in fancy hotels, introduce me to his partners, and say, "This is my daughter. She is the future of this company." People would smile and nod, and I would stand taller, my chest filled with pride. Every morning before school, I stopped by the office to help file documents or answer emails. After school, I skipped hanging out with friends and instead went straight to the company headquarters. My evenings were filled with learning balance sheets, managing small projects, and sitting quietly in the corner of his meetings, memorizing how deals were made. While my classmates studied for tests, I studied the art of negotiation. I didn't live the life of a teenager. I lived the life of an heir. Meanwhile, my brother lived like a king without a crown. He never cared about the business. He spent his days in sports cars, at nightclubs, or traveling with friends. Everyone in the family joked that he was the golden boy who never had to try. I didn't mind at first. I thought, he doesn't care, so naturally, the business will come to me. That belief kept me going. It gave every sleepless night a reason. There were moments when I questioned the fairness of it all. I was exhausted, stressed, sometimes even crying quietly in my room because I felt so alone. My father never once said thank you. It was always, "Do more. You can't afford mistakes. If you want to be great, you must sacrifice." And I did. I sacrificed everything. My friends stopped inviting me to gatherings because they knew I would never come. I missed birthdays, weddings, and even my own graduation party because I was sitting beside my father at some corporate dinner. The strange part was, outsiders envied me. They would say, "You're so lucky. You'll inherit everything. You're being trained to be powerful." They couldn't see the truth, that my life was slipping away, day by day, buried under my father's demands. But the hardest part wasn't the work. It was watching how my father treated my brother compared to me. My brother could crash an expensive car, and father would laugh it off, saying, "Boys will be boys." But if I made a small error in a report, I would face hours of scolding. Still, I convinced myself it was fine. I told myself, this is how he's preparing me. He's hard on me because he trusts me. One day, I'll be glad. Deep down, I was proud to be the responsible one. I thought my father was building me into the leader he always wanted. People at the company even began coming to me for answers, not him. "Ask her," they would say. "She knows how the system works." And it was true. Slowly, the business started to feel like mine already. I managed staff, negotiated with suppliers, even solved conflicts when my father wasn't around. I can still remember one evening, sitting in the boardroom while my father left for a call. One of the senior managers leaned toward me and whispered, "When your time comes, we'll be ready for you." That sentence filled me with hope. It was proof that people saw my worth, proof that I wasn't just working in the shadows, I was becoming the future. But hope is dangerous when it's built on lies. I didn't know it then, but all those sacrifices, all those lost years were never going to lead to the reward I was promised. My father's heart, his pride, his empire, they were never mine to claim. They belonged to someone else all along, and the signs were there. I just didn't want to see them. The first time I realized something was wrong was during a family dinner. My father was telling one of his old friends about the company's growth. He spoke with pride, listing out every achievement from the last 5 years. I sat there waiting, thinking he would mention me, his daughter who had been there through it all, who had put in endless hours to make those successes possible. But instead, he pointed at my brother and said, "One day, he will carry this legacy even higher." The word stung. I tried to laugh it off, but inside I felt my stomach twist. My brother smiled lazily, not even paying attention. He didn't care. And yet he was the one being celebrated as the heir. Moments like that kept repeating. At family gatherings, relatives would joke, "She's just the helper. The real boss is the son." Everyone laughed, including my parents. I forced a smile each time, but every word felt like a cut I couldn't heal from. I wanted to believe it was just talk, that deep down my father knew the truth, that I was the one running the company beside him. But soon, the signs grew harder to ignore. One afternoon, I stayed late at the office reviewing some contracts. The legal papers listed the shareholders of the company. I expected to see my father's name, of course, and then maybe a space for me. After all, he had promised I was being prepared to take over. But my name was nowhere. I flipped through page after page, searching for it. Instead, I saw my brother's name. My careless, absent brother. He was listed as a shareholder. My hands trembled as I read it again and again, thinking maybe I had misunderstood. But no, the truth was in ink, permanent and cold. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying my father's words in my head. "This company will be yours." How many times had he said that? How many times had I believed him? And yet, here was the proof that it wasn't me he trusted. It wasn't me he was grooming. It was him. The brother who never lifted a finger. I tried to confront my father about it once, carefully. I asked why my brother's name was on the documents. He frowned, waved his hand, and said, "Don't worry about legal details. Focus on learning. Your time will come." His voice was sharp, almost angry, as if I had crossed a line. That moment left me shaken. It wasn't just avoidance. It was a warning. From then on, I began noticing small things that added up to something bigger. Invitations to important dinners went to my brother, not me. Business partners started shaking his hand first, while I stood by silently. Even in office conversations, my father would say things like, "My son will take over one day," as if my presence didn't even matter. The cruelest part was how the employees treated me. For years, they had respected me as the one who worked the hardest. But slowly, I could see their eyes shifting. They whispered about how the real boss was my brother. Once I overheard 2 staff members talking. One said, "She thinks she's in charge, but we all know who will end up running this place." The other laughed. I wanted to scream at them, to tell them that they didn't know the truth. but deep down, I was scared that maybe they were right. The walls of the office that once felt like home began to close in on me. I started feeling like an outsider in a world I had built with my own hands. Every signed document, every meeting, every joke about my place, it all whispered the same thing. You don't belong here. And still, I kept holding on to hope. I told myself my father wouldn't betray me like that there had to be a reason, some mistake, something I wasn't seeing yet. But deep inside, I knew the truth was waiting for me. It was only a matter of time before it came crashing down. It all came crashing down the year my father got sick. He had always been larger than life, sharp suits, strong voice, the kind of man who could silence a whole room just by walking into it. But suddenly that power began to fade. His health declined faster than anyone expected. What had once been endless late nights in the office turned into hospital stays and whispered conversations about treatment options. At first, I was terrified for him. For weeks, I stayed by his side, running the company during the day and sitting in the hospital at night. My brother came by occasionally, usually with flowers or expensive gifts, but never stayed long. Everyone still saw me as the devoted one, the daughter who carried her father's empire on her back while he rested. In my heart, I told myself, this is when he'll finally see it. This is when he'll know I'm the one who truly cares. But I was wrong. One afternoon, my father's lawyer called me into a meeting. My brother was already there, lounging in a chair with his usual careless grin. I assumed it was a routine update about business management while my father recovered. Instead, the lawyer placed a thick folder on the table and said, "These are the official transfer documents. Your father wanted everything in order should his health decline further." I leaned forward eagerly, expecting to see my name written alongside my brother's, maybe even as the primary heir. But as the pages turned, my breath froze in my chest. The documents were clear. Every single share of the company had already been transferred to my brother. Not one percentage for me. Not a single mention of the years I had poured into that place. It was as if I didn't exist at all. I stared at the paper, my hands trembling. "There must be a mistake," I whispered. My voice shook, but the lawyer only shook his head. "No mistake. Your father signed this last year? Last year. That meant all those nights he told me I was the future. All those weekends I spent believing in his promise. He had already erased me from the legacy." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the papers apart. But all I could do was sit there in silence while my brother smirked, tapping his fingers against the table like he had won a prize he hadn't even tried for. When I finally found the strength to speak, I turned to the lawyer. "But I've been running the company. I've been doing everything. Doesn't that count for anything?" He looked at me with pity in his eyes. "I'm sorry. Legally, it doesn't matter." That night, I confronted my father in the hospital. I sat beside his bed, my heart racing, and asked, "Why? Why would you do this to me? Why would you lie to me all these years?" His eyes, once sharp, now looked tired. He sighed and said, "You don't understand. A daughter can help, but a son carries the legacy. That's just how it has to be." Those words shattered me. I had heard many painful things in my life, but nothing compared to that. In one sentence, he erased everything I had ever done for him, every dream I had built, every sacrifice I had made. I walked out of that hospital room numb, my chest hollow. Outside, the city lights sparkled against the night sky, and all I could think was how I had been living in an illusion. My entire future had been stolen, not by strangers, but by the very people I trusted most. For days, I felt lost, drifting through the motions of life without direction. Employees still came to me for decisions, but I couldn't look at them the same way. To them, I was still the leader. To me, I was nothing more than a shadow, someone who had been used and then cast aside. But slowly, that emptiness began to change. It hardened into something else, something sharper. If my father believed I wasn't worthy of the empire I helped him build, I would prove him wrong. If my brother thought he could sit in luxury on the foundation of my work, he was in for a surprise. That was the moment I stopped being the obedient daughter. That was the moment betrayal lit a fire inside me. The next board meeting was the breaking point. For weeks after learning about the transfer, I tried to carry on as if nothing had changed. I walked into the office every morning in my tailored suits, heels clicking across the marble floors, greeting employees with the same steady confidence. But inside I was crumbling. Every time I passed the portraits of my father on the wall, I felt a stab of anger. And every time I saw my brother swagger into the office late, sunglasses on, coffee in hand, I felt my blood boil. That morning, however, I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. The meeting began like any other. Executives filled the sleek glass conference room, laptops open, notes ready. I sat at the head of the table out of habit. After all, I was the one who had been leading these meetings for years. But this time, my brother sat across from me, legs stretched out, tapping on his phone without a care in the world. Then my father entered. Weak, frail, but still carrying that aura of command. He lowered himself into the seat beside my brother and cleared his throat. "From today," he announced, "your brother will officially take over as the head of the company. It's time everyone respects the decision." The room fell silent. I looked around. Some of the executives shifted uneasily, their eyes darting between me and my father. They all knew who had been keeping the company alive. They all knew the truth. But no one dared to speak. My chest tightened. My hands curled into fists under the table. Finally, I said, "With all due respect, Father, this is a mistake." Every head turned toward me. My father's eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone." "No," I said firmly, my voice rising. "I will not watch my tone. For years, I have given everything to this company. I worked harder than anyone. I sacrificed my personal life, my dreams, my peace, while I pointed at my brother, who raised an eyebrow, clearly enjoying the show. While he spent his time partying, wasting money, and living off the family name. And now you expect me to sit quietly while you hand everything over to him?" My father slammed his hand on the table, though the sound was weaker than it used to be. "Enough, you're out of line." But I didn't back down. Not this time. My voice trembled with rage, but I held my ground. "No, Father. You're out of line. You promised me. You told me I was the future of this company. You let me believe that my work meant something. And all the while you had already erased me from the picture." My brother leaned forward with a smirk. "Maybe you just weren't cut out for the big seat. Maybe Dad knew I was the real choice all along." That was the moment something inside me snapped. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "You think this is a game?" I shouted at him. "You think inheriting a company means showing up late and looking cool? This isn't a trophy you've won. It's blood, sweat, and sacrifice, and you haven't earned an ounce of it." The room was dead silent. Executives avoided eye contact, staring down at their notes. My father's face was pale, but his jaw was set. He still wouldn't admit the truth. He still wouldn't see me, and that was when the deepest cut came, not from my brother, but from my father himself. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "No matter what you've done, you will never be the heir. You're my daughter, not my successor. That's the end of it." The words hit like a blade through my chest. My throat tightened, my vision blurred, but I refused to let them see me cry. Not here, not in front of them. I straightened my shoulders, lifted my chin, and said quietly but firmly, "Then you've both made the biggest mistake of your lives." With that, I gathered my papers, pushed back my chair, and walked out of the room. My heels echoed against the floor, each step heavier than the last, but also sharper, stronger. I didn't know what my plan was yet. All I knew was that I would not let their betrayal define me. This was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of my revenge. After I walked out of that meeting, I felt a cold calm settle over me. Anger was there, but it was steady now, like a fire I could control. I needed a plan, not a scream. I could not beat them with words anymore. They had already shown the world who they wanted to believe. So I decided to beat them with truth. The first thing I did was gather proof. For years I had kept copies of reports, emails, and notes. I had names, dates, and details that showed exactly what I had done for the company. I started by collecting everything I could from my office desk and my laptop. I sat late into the night, printing files, copying folders, and organizing them in neat stacks. Each paper was a small victory: an invoice I had handled, a deal I had closed, a staff list I had rearranged to save money. Little by little, the story of my work took shape on the desk in front of me. Then I reached out to former partners and clients. Some remembered me clearly because I had been the one to answer when problems arose. Others had been helped by the deals I had negotiated. They agreed to speak to a lawyer if needed. I also found witnesses inside the company, managers, accountants, and longtime employees who knew how much I had done. Many of them were afraid to come forward at first. They worried about losing their jobs or being blamed. But when they saw my papers, and when I told them what had happened, their fear turned into anger. They wanted what was right. I hired a lawyer who understood corporate law and would not be intimidated by my family's money. He listened to every detail, read every file, and asked the questions I could not ask in the boardroom. He told me there were ways to prove my contribution even if my name was not on the ownership papers. There were laws that could recognize the work of someone who had been promised a role, especially when that work was real and documented. We filed a claim. The lawyer asked the court to recognize my labor and management as a legal basis for partial ownership and to freeze any major transactions while the case was decided. The day the court agreed to a temporary freeze, I felt a relief so sharp it nearly made me cry. The company could not be sold, and my brother could not empty the accounts. For the first time since the papers were signed, my family could not move forward without facing the truth. News spread inside the company like wildfire. Employees whispered in hallways. Suppliers called to ask about payments. My brother, who had always acted like the winner, grew nervous. He started missing meetings and returned calls late. The lifestyle that had felt eternal began to wobble. Creditors grew cautious when they heard the company was under legal review. Contracts were delayed. Deals stalled. The empire that had looked unbreakable began to feel fragile. My parents were furious. My father accused me of betrayal. He called me ungrateful in front of people and said I was ruining the family name. My mother cried and begged me to stop, but I could see the fear in her eyes. Fear of what would happen if the world learned the truth about who actually ran the company. My brother lashed out, trying to threaten me with lawsuits and insults. He tried to hire lawyers to fight back, to paint me as a schemer. But the documents did not lie. The emails, the timesheets, the signed memos, these were things no one could easily deny. The legal process was slow and hard. There were tense depositions where I had to speak about every decision I had made. There were nights I doubted myself and wondered if I had misread everything. But each time doubt came, I held a paper in my hand that reminded me of where I had been and what I had built. The court listened. The judge asked tough questions, but the truth carried weight. When the ruling finally came, the judge recognized my claim to a part of the company based on my years of unpaid labor and the promises my father had made. The court ordered a formal review of ownership and required my brother to account for certain funds. The decision did not erase the pain, but it changed everything. It gave me a seat at the table that was not given to me by lies, but earned by proof. My brother's world crumbled slowly. Business partners withdrew offers. His credit lines tightened. The parties and luxury trips stopped when bills were late and cards were declined. He tried to act proud, but I could see the shame in his eyes. My parents grieved differently, not for their son's pain, but for the public fall of the family image. They could not control the whispers now. I did not celebrate their fall. This was not joy. It was justice. I had wanted my life back, a recognition that the years I gave were not empty. As the company began to reorganize, I stepped into a real role with legal backing. I hired people to help me do what I could not do alone. I set new rules for fairness in the office. I made sure the staff who had stood by me were protected. That mattered more than money or titles. What I learned is this: power can be hidden in quiet work. Promises spoken in soft voices can be dangerous if no one keeps a record. I had been erased once, but I used the only weapon I had, proof, to carve my name back into the story. In the end, I didn't just win a piece of paper or a percentage of shares. I won something far more powerful: my voice. For years, my father believed a daughter could never carry his empire. He believed a son's name, no matter how careless, meant more than my years of sacrifice. But the truth is, legacies are not built on names. They're built on work, on loyalty, on the long nights and endless effort no one sees. When the court recognized my place, it wasn't only a victory for me. It was a statement to every woman who has ever been told she doesn't belong. I proved that betrayal may cut deep, but it can also sharpen you into someone stronger than your enemies ever imagined. As for my brother, the empire he thought was his playground became his downfall. His greed and arrogance left him with nothing but regrets. And my parents? They were left to watch as the daughter they had erased became the one who carried the future forward. So this is my message: never let anyone write you out of your own story. Even when those who should love you most betray you, you still have the power to rise. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own battles and strength, don't forget to subscribe to Family Betrayal Stories. We bring you real tales of revenge, heartbreak, and justice every week. And your support helps us share more voices that deserve to be heard. Because sometimes, the only way to answer betrayal is with truth.